Can I have the slide for the Mothman prophecies? Yeah, as Chris said, I'm going to pursue this from the psychosocial hypothesis. Now, the psychosocial hypothesis was developed from it's developed from the ideas of John A. Keel, the author of the Mothman prophecies. Was it the Mothman? The Mothman prophecies, UFOs, Trojan Horse, Disneyland of the Gods, and a number of others. And it was Keel. And can I have the one for Jacques Vallée?
I don't get the volume.
Yep, Jacques Vallée, UFOs, the Psychic Solution, UFO Influences on the Human Race, who first pointed out the deep similarities between the UFOs encounters and fairy lore, and they took the view that there was a real phenomenon behind all behind the UFO experience, but it was the same. But in previous years, it had taken the form of fairies, gods and spirits, and demons. But as time had gone on, it were now taking. They were now flying about in UFOs. The psychosocial view states that the imagery, it sees the UFO encounters and the UFO experience as an internal psychological event, which uses the images of the society around it. In our modern society, we have a lot of science fiction, and so the images and the messages we get, representing what you might say as the cosmic or the transcendent, are now being communicated or formed in the shape, through spacecraft, aliens, the imagery of science fiction. However, sorry, I've got stuff here. However, there are still UFO researchers like Kevin McClure. And can I have the alien scripture image up, Chris? Yep, Kevin McClure. Kevin McClure and Jenny Randles believe that there still is a paranormal element to it, so that the imagery might come from science fiction, but somebody's still somebody from outside is still talking to us, and hence alien scripture, because which expresses both the extraterrestrial nature and the fact that it's also religious. Now, the actual contacts with extraterrestrials, and indeed a prototype flying saucer, go all the way back to the 18th century with the great Swedish mystic and philosopher and scientist Emanuel Swedenborg. Next slide, please, for Mr. Swedenborg's saucer. There he is, and he designed a flying saucer. That's his saucer. And he had a series of visions in which he talked to angels and received messages. But he also traveled to other worlds. I mean, the Swedenborgians deeply influenced the spiritualists, because it's from the Swedenborgians that the spiritualists took over the idea of seance, as to describe their sittings. And throughout the 19th century, again, with after the rise of spiritualism, people you have people going on about talking about their contacts mentally with people on other planets like Mars. can we have Mozart's house on Jupiter? Yeah, this is one of the automatic drawings produced in the 19th century. And yeah, it starts, yeah, and people starts going on their astral travels. You know, they go around the solar system. Let's see. Sorry, I'm reading from my notes here. You know, there's Sherman Denton in 1866 claimed that he could travel astrally to other planets and that Mars was inhabited. And then, of course, there was Elaine Muller, Elaine Muller, given the pseudonym of Helen Smith, who claimed that she was in contact with the Martians and the Martian language. And then this carries on into the 20th century, when William Ferguson, in 1947, he travels to Mars. He claimed he was traveling to Mars in his fourth dimensional body through the seventh dimension. Now, this looks very, very much like astral travel, or or to go back to the 18th century mesmerists, traveling clairvoyance, but wrapped in the terminology of contemporary advanced mathematics and cosmology. So you can see it developing from there. Now, people start developing sort of like also mystical ideas about the fairies and other paranormal entities, which seem to anticipate the UFO encounter. Can we have Evan Wentz's The Fairy Faith in the Celtic Countries? Yes, this fellow, W.I. Evans Wentz. I mean, this is one of the classic texts of the fairy faith, about the fairy faith, when in Britain and Brittany, Ireland and Brittany. And one of the interesting things in there is that he talks about meeting an Irish mystic who says about the fairies that they are an old race. I think they come from the stars, and which sounds very, very much what Vallée and Kill were saying, although possibly not literally. And then we get to Mr. Crowley. Can I have the Crowley lamb picture? Yes. In 1919, Crowley and one of his Scarlet Women were in New York, and they performed, I think it was the Amaranth working, over several days. And eventually, this culminated in the manifestation or appearance of this person, Lamb, who, again, he comes from another dimension, or somewhere outside. And what interests ufologists is the fact that, yes, he has a large, bald head, like a lot of UFO aliens. Now, then we get to the appearance of the UFO saucers. Now, this is when you get back to the science fiction. Now, science fiction, something like very much like modern science fiction, emerges in the 18th century. I've just today received a copy of Micromiga, which is an early science fiction short story by Voltaire, in which aliens from the planet Sirius visit Earth and give us their entire knowledge, and it's all blank. But in the 18th century, there was, can we have the next slide about the Mercury electric spacecraft? No, the Shawshank. Oh, well, we can do him anyway. That's the one. It's an 18th century French story about a scientist on Mercury who invents an electric spacecraft, and he falls out with the Academy because the Mercurian Academy are all stick in the muds and don't believe that it's possible. And he demonstrates it and is about to fly off on his journey when it's stolen by his rival, you see. Oh, yes. And his rival flies to Venus and then on to Earth, where he crashes it. Now, I think that is the very first UFO crash in science fiction, and it is going back to the 19th century. And then, or rather the 18th century, and then in the 19th century, you get other proto-science fictional works like Jacques Robidas, French future history, the war of the 21st century. Thank you. And that's a submarine. And as you can see, it does look a bit like a flying saucer. And I mean, Robida's immense fun. I mean, if you want to see what future warfare looks like, or future life from a 19th century French perspective, I mean, get hold of a copy of any science fiction book which deals with him and reproduces them. I mean, there's one magnificent picture of a taxi cab driver smoking and looking grumpy because he has an aerial taxi, which is an airship tethered to the top of, I think, Notre Dame Cathedral, waiting for his fare. But enough of him. Then we know about then, as the 19th century wears on, there's a great airship scare where people start seeing airships, mysterious airships in the sky, often brightly lit. Sometimes there's a man in them who explains that he's their inventor. Other times they're crewed by foreign-looking men. And this is also reflected in the popular science fiction of the time, like Frank Reed airship. Coming up. Back a bit. Yep, this fellow. Frank Reed. I think there were a number of, I think there were a number of science fiction stories being published about Frank Reed. I mean, I've got the impression that there was one where he's, with the Steam Man, which is this steam-driven robot, was, a lot of them. But as you can see, that's how the 19th century viewed the air, the electric airship coming. And then you get the pulps, 1920s going on 1930s. You get the pulp, you get pulp, the SF pulps, Science Wonder Stories. There you go, $300, the best short story. And as you can see, there is a spacecraft looking very, very much like the flying saucer, abducting what looks like Big Ben. 1929, the Buck Rogers strip, if you can remember that. I mean, if you can remember Buck Rogers, I grew up when they were showing the showing the old Republic serials on TV in the 1970s. Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon. Later in the 1980s, made into a TV show, and there it is, another flying saucer. So there's a lot of science fiction images, there. And then it also anticipates the cigar-shaped UFOs. I mean, can we have astounding cigar-shaped UFOs if it's next up, Chris? Yep, there you go. So I think that's, that's September 1939. So we're coming very close to, to Kenneth. Oh God, I've forgotten his name. Kenneth Arnold's 1947 sighting of the UFOs. The trouble is, at the same time that these are coming out, from I think the late 19th century onwards, these, the first airplane pioneers and then the aerospace companies start developing dish-shaped craft, and I've managed to find photographs of a few of them. Can we have some of those, please, Chris? That's one of the first, and I think that's around about the time of the First World War. I think, another one, please. Yep. There you go, flying around. Annular wing, it's called. Can we have another? Lee Richards circular wing. Yes, that was one. That was one of those which was going to be, I think, carrying a lot of people. Next one. I know. I'm not saying. Yep. There you see a saucer wing right above the aircraft, and again. I mean, this is coming up. That's Henry Coanda, and his plan for a circular shaped aircraft using the Coanda effect, which will be where the airflow would be directed down the saucer's body and onto the ground, so lifting it up. It's the Coanda effect. Do we have another one? That is the Vault Flying Pancake. And we're heading up to I think the 1930s, 1940s there. And then there's another one. This gets developed into a sort of military version. Yep. And of course, it's all very hush-hush. This is during the war. Amazing stories. Put that on the cover. And that's pretty much like the all-new advanced design of the Vault Pancake was going to look like. And well, did he know something he shouldn't? I don't think so. I think what happened was that the artist in this looked at the earlier version of the Vault Pancake, before it was classified, and then used the his artistic imagination to create that. Doctor Who had a similar problem years ago with the John Pertwee story, The Sea Devils, where they had a phone call from the Ministry of Defence, or MI5, over the shot of a submarine they'd used in their special effects. And the submarine the submarine was actually a model, plastic model kit, and to make it look a bit futuristic, they'd altered the propeller on it. And this was the problem, because the way they'd altered it looked like a new propeller system, which was definitely for our submarines, which was definitely hush hush. So they phoned up the Doctor Who's producers and said, "Has there been a leak? Where do you get this from?" And they said, "We just did it. It's an airfix kit." But that's one of the problems. So if occasionally, just occasionally, science fiction artists and model makers can be just too close for comfort. But I have to say that I think when it goes to influencing science fiction, the influences also go the other way, as we can see from the next slide, which should be about science fiction comics and pulps. As you can see, There are all these spacecraft. This is after Kenneth Arnold's sighting, and once you get into the the 50s and 60s, and so the classic image of a spacecraft for many of these publications is a flying saucer. If you go back to if you go back to the 1950s Disney film Forbidden Planet, which is roughly based on The Tempest, and is about an Earth ship visiting an archaeologist and his daughter to find out, who have been excavating a dead planet, to find out what has happened to the remains of their expedition and everyone else. The spaceship the Earthmen land in is a flying saucer. It's a piece of classic science fiction. It's got water pigeon in it and a very, very young Leslie Nielsen playing a spaceship captain. Also Robbie the Robot. So you can't go wrong with that. Now, there's also the problem of where we get the images of these the inhabitants. Now they vary, and and with some of the UFO occupants and the aliens, you can see it's based on science fiction. Other times it's based on folklore, like when we have a dwarf. Is there a dwarf amongst there? Oh, that's a coming of the ice. Yes, there you see small little aliens. The Coming of the Ice by G. Vertenbaker, again, 1920s science fiction. Small aliens. Now, you can also see it in films, like in 1929, they make a film comes out, Mysterious Island, and it's a form of, and it's a version of the island of Dr. Moreau. And in one of the pictures from the movie, yep, that's the man who evolved. Yep, that's the one, thank you. We have this image. And if you look at them, bald, short, bald, with bulging eyes and little in the way of mouth, and also webbed teeth. And they look, and so, it looks science, it's science fictional, but it looks like, it looks like the classic UFO occupants, or like the Greys, or he's heading in that direction. Now, where does all this come from? Well, it actually comes from 19th century ideas about evolution. There was an idea called orthogenetics, which said that once evolution started, it would proceed in along a set course. And so as humanity evolved, yes, our brains would evolve and our physical body would atrophy. And so we become little short men who are bald with big brains, and little short women as well. That comes from a science fiction short story called The Man Who Evolved, which is about a man. It's one of those, the scientist who goes too far, and he builds a device to evolve himself. And at first it works really well because he becomes this tall hunk with an imposing aspect to his face, and higher forehead showing he's got brains. And then he becomes this these short bald types with little dwarf bodies, and finally that's all he is, a huge giant brain. Now, this idea that we're all going to evolve into something like the Greys with telepathic powers is found in a number of science fictional and proto-science fictional short stories. It also turns up in one of John Wyndham's short stories from about, I think it's the 1940s, might be 1950s. And this is about an invasion from the future. It's about two scientists who are working in their lab, and suddenly this man turns up from 200 years hence. And he's actually fleeing an invasion from the men of the far future, further up in time, who have, who want us to swap places with them because they're I don't know whether I can't remember now whether they're facing the end of the universe or an invasion from somewhere else. But these future humans are short, they have big brains, they have bald heads, and they have their teeth and digestive systems have atrophied, as have their feet. As have their feet, but they've got massive psychic powers and they can knock you over telekinetically. So, and that seems to be where that's where that comes on. But of course, there's also in this a very powerful influence of folklore. For example, if you go to the Nordic countries or in Europe, some of the UFO encounters, with the occupants actually look more like the dwarves of traditional legend than anything from science fiction. And then somebody has said that when the Russians see, when they encounter UFO occupants, they're giants, rather like the bogatirs of ancient Russian, legend and myth. There also seems to be obviously there's an influence from from film as well. Now, one of the UFO encounters which is particularly strange is that, and I've forgotten who it actually was, but I believe it was a Peruvian or Brazilian dentist who was walking home one night, and he was frightened by and he met he encountered a UFO alien, which was like a mummy. And I don't think it's. Can everybody hear me? Right.
Hi, Dave. I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Right. It's just I'm getting messages. It's talking about low audio quality. So
I'm sorry about that. What's going on?
Yeah, I think that's me. But anyway, for some reason. Anyway, he's walking home one night. He meets a UFO alien like a mummy. And now, going back a bit, 1960s, there's a series of movies from, in Mexico, starring El Santo, who is the Mexican who is a luchador, masked wrestler. And I think we've got one of those. Yes, El Santo contra las momies de Guanajuato. So there you have it. And I think that influences, or may have played an influence on this, on the dentist encounter with these aliens, because it wouldn't surprise me if the movie was playing all over Latin America. And so the image may have been taken over. It may have been taken over by him subconsciously to, express, that reality. There you go. That's roughly what an alien looked like who turned up in the 1970s in Norway. As you can see, short, pointy hat. It looks a bit like a troll. And then, let's see. Oh gosh, I'm running out of steam. You dated someone who looked like Santos. Ooh.
Hannah and Nisa. That's a Nisa man, a fairy.
Nisaman, a fairy. Yeah, yeah. What else goes on? Yeah. No. It's at that point. There's also now people aren't, or people don't. People don't just. Hello, I haven't finished yet. Thank you. No, people aren't just communicating or hearing the aliens through, through encounters like that. You also have people. Channeling aliens. One of them, of course, was Yuri Gagarin with Andrea. When he was conducting experiments in the 1970s with Andrea Puharich. Puharich was also working with another medium, and I've forgotten her name, but she claimed she was also channeling a group called the Nine, who were these, extraterrestrial beings. And of course, you have the UFO, new religious movements, I think we should call them. I mean, you have the George King of the Atheist Society, who was cooking in his kitchen one night, and he heard a voice saying, "Prepare to become the voice of interplanetary parliament." Also, I mean, George King was British, moved to America. And also across the pond, there was Spaceship Ruthie Norman, who was the leader of the Unarius religion, which again, it teaches a mixture of sort of various UFO, New Age and extraterrestrial ideas. And the second in command of her religion, believed he was Satan. And one of the things they believed is that he's been healed. Satan has been healed through meeting Spaceship Ruthie. And yeah, it just struck me that if you're talking about low self-image, I think that's pretty low, But there, I mean, she was quite a celebrity in LA because she used to drive around with a giant flying saucer on the roof of her car. Now, we're going back here. Some people have wondered if there isn't also a really demonic aspect to UFO encounters as well. Janet and Colin Board, in their book, Life Beyond Planet Earth, talk about how people hear disembodied, sort of disembodied voices, and that this sounds very much like the process by which demons communicate to humans in one of the works of a 16th century French demonologist, who says they construct vocal organs out of the air through which they can talk to people. And there's a 15th century German grimoire, a spell book, which says that which provides the spell for summoning up a group of demons who have a ship, and they will take you in the ship to anywhere in the world you want to go, but it advises you this is only illusory. Now, that sounds very, very much like the type of encounter Keel and Vallée, we're interested in, particularly John Keel. I mean, he talks about how the similarities, very strong similarities between some of the experiences of people who meet aliens and people accused of witchcraft in the Middle Ages and the 16th and 17th centuries. So yes, and then And then there was the experience of, it was a group of 3 people driving through Chris's part of the world, I think it's Suffolk, in the 1960s. And I think we should have an image for it. Demon encounter, demon UFO, fire demon. Right. Oh well.
Do you mean is this the Woodbridge encounter, the one with the figure that appeared near the substation? No, unfortunately, we didn't have the image for that one, Dave, but I know what you mean, a fiery humanoid.
Fiery humanoid, yeah. Yeah. Their car stops. It's 2 men and a woman. One of the men gets out of the car and they see, I think, a glow behind the trees. The man comes back, then goes back choking and, and coughing and collapses. Something bright orange flies off, and when the poor fellow, the poor fellow is taken to the hospital. And when he comes round and he's being treated, he said he had an irresistible compulsion to get out of the car, and he saw a man in the flames speaking to him. Now, I don't know. Now, I think in previous centuries, we would have said, people would automatically have said, no, that's a demon. Yeah. Is it the same thing as a UFO encounter? I think so. It flies off. So there's, there is a mixture in the UFO. In ufology, there is this mixture of occult, paranormal, and science fictional images, going really all the way back to, as I said, to the to the 18th century and the rise of the first, the rise of science fiction and the emergence of Swedenborgianism and mesmerism. And that, I think, will have to be it. Thank you very much.
Dave, thank you very much from me and everybody this evening for your fascinating talk. CJ, did you want to ask a few questions first before I start going through the list of questions from everybody else?
Okay, well, let's start with, sorry, chaos is my room. Right, good evening, everybody, and welcome. I hope you enjoyed the talk. One of the things that I think first struck me was that you are not saying that these things don't exist.
No,
or don't occur, or they're not real. You are saying that they clothe themselves in imagery that is derived from, in imagery that is derived from the actual cultural realm. Now that's interesting because it's not denying the reality of the experience. Many people think the psychosocial experience, So if they're real experiences and they're being mediated through our culture, you said the process isn't necessarily one way. Could it be that the reason that science fiction from the very beginning has used some of this imagery is because those images have been derived from real experiences and from the culture and from the folk tales of youth? Everyone hears fairy stories when they're a child. Could it be that that has always shaped, and vice versa? Could it be that actual experiences, actual encounters have shaped the science fiction narratives?
That's a very, very interesting question. It's possible. It's certainly possible. I mean, a number of the early pulp science fiction writers were members of the Fortean Society. And I think Eric Frank Russell was.
Certainly was.
And you can see the influence. Certainly see the influence of paranormal ideas in Alfred Bester's Tiger, where people develop the idea of teleportation and teleportation. And teleportation. It's really a refinement of spiritual teleportation. So I think there is. Whether there's a direct experience by some of the writers, I don't know, but there is. there is certainly a very strong interest in the paranormal. What you find from reading, I mean, I just finished reading a book about the SF magazine Astounding, pulp magazine Astounding. And what comes across is that its editor, John W. Campbell, was very, very much into the development of what we would call psychic powers.
Yeah.
And that if you could develop your psychic powers, you would become, you know, something like Superman.
Have you ever read, a bit of an interesting question, because I don't know if you know it, but I think it had a major influence on the scare ship the scare ship stories of 1910 onwards, the ABC series, the Airship Board of Control.
Oh, I've heard of it.
Rudyard Kipling wrote a couple of novels in which, set in the year 2000 to 2025, in which the far future is a kind of free trade utopia of the ABC as a world government that maintains its thing through technology and through flying airships. And the ABC stories are definitely science fiction and futurology, but they were written by Rudyard Kipling. And that makes them particularly poignant and interesting now. He was actually, although he's regarded as the poet of empire, he was actually a great critic of the British Empire. And if you read poems like Gunga Din, he was actually also an anti-racist. And Recessional, one of his most famous poems that was written in 1914, is about the death of empires. He's quite an interesting and complex character, but it's worth looking up the ABC series because I often think about them. Anyway, we can talk every Friday, Dave, as we often do. As in fact, we did for 30 years when every Friday we'd meet up, didn't we?
Yep.
Hopefully we'll be able to do that again soon now that things are getting better and you'll be able to travel again soon.